Everybody, episode 622 with the podcast that is Swimming America, the Air Tour Sports Podcast presented by Betfred Sportsbook. It is Monday, November 14th, 2022. People, I hope everybody's doing. I hope everybody is having a great day. I hope everybody is ready for, what should be a fun, loaded episode of a Monday Aaron Tour Sports Podcast. A little bit later than I like to get it out, but we got a lot to talk about here on a Monday. Here is what we're going to discuss on today's show. We're going to open disappointing Saturday for the Pac-12. 3 teams enter with legitimate playoff aspirations. 1 team comes out with those legitimate playoff aspirations. From there, we continue the conversation. Speaking of the Pac-12, I want to have an interesting conversation about the state of USC and the state of Oklahoma, where it feels as though Brent Venables is completely getting a pass for the Oklahoma program going off the rails since Lincoln Riley left. We will continue the conversation with some other odds and ends from the college football weekend. Mark Stoops, for the first time, I think, getting some real fire from the Kentucky fan base, and deservedly so. My UConn Huskies, how about them Huskies? And finally, we wrap. I will replay a segment that I did. I was on the aircraft carrier Friday night, Michigan State, Gonzaga. So we'll throw to a pre-recorded segment live from the aircraft carrier. Really fun Friday night. And by the way, college hoops is really ramping up. Obviously, on Tuesday is the Champions Classic. We'll do some reaction after that. And then it's go time with college hoops. It's go time with college football. It is a very fun time of year. With that said, though, let's get to the topic of the day. And the topic of the day, it isn't often in November we've really had a reason to lead with the Pac-12. We all know the Pac-12 story by now. We all know that the college football playoff started in 2014. We all know that in all these years of the college football playoff, the Pac-12 has only been represented twice. Oregon in the first year, Washington in the third year, 0 playoff entries since 2016. And this felt like it was finally going to be the year that the Pac-12 breaks through. Had 4 teams in the top 15 of the most recent playoff poll, and 3 teams that I truly believe, and we broke it down last week, that had a legitimate shot to make a run to the college football playoff. An 8-1 Oregon, an 8-1 UCLA, an 8-1 USC, all entering the week. And to USC's credit, they took care of business on Friday night, setting up for what we thought was going to be really a banner day in the Pac-12, which more importantly was going to set up a great weekend this weekend, where you had Utah, Oregon, you had USC, UCLA, de facto Pac-12 semifinals, leading to a de facto Pac-12 to a real Pac-12 championship game, which would feel like a potential playoff play-in game. Unfortunately, the Pac-12 all over itself after USC took care of business on Friday night against Colorado. Oregon enters as a 14-point favorite of the Betfred Sportsbook, 13.5, 14 points. They end up losing at home to Washington. And then UCLA, well over a 2-touchdown favorite at home. They lose to Arizona as well. And let's get into each game, break it down, because I do think it was interesting, fascinating, and disappointing on both fronts for so many different reasons. Starting with Oregon, listen, we talked about this on Friday's show. We didn't do a ton of deep dive in terms of game previews on Friday's show. We talked a lot about Mark Stoops. We're going to get to him in a minute. But we really didn't do a ton of game previews on Friday's show. But one thing that we did discuss, I said, look, I do think Washington has the blueprint to make things interesting against Oregon. My official Betfred pick was Washington plus the points, Washington plus 13.5, because Oregon, I believe this might be the most deep, balanced, well put together roster that I've ever seen from an Oregon football team, including the team that almost won a championship back in 2010. But at the same time, if they had one single weakness, it was the secondary. They were ranked 11th out of 12 Pac-12 teams in pass defense. Washington led the Pac-12 in pass offense. So I saw the scenario where it could be close, but I'm not going to sit here and lie. One thing I always do, I keep it 100 with the kids, okay? I think that's what the kids say. Keep it 100, right? I keep it 100 with you. I keep it real. I keep it honest. I thought Oregon was winning this game. Instead, what we saw, I think, very early on was that Washington wasn't going to be intimidated or imposed by the loud crowd at Outson Stadium. because of the fact that they were able to move the ball. The crowd wasn't as much of a factor as it was, say, 2-3 weeks ago against UCLA. And we get this crazy back and forth game that really turned into one of the games of the year. Unfortunately for Oregon, it really does come down to basically the final 2 possessions, right? Oregon, with 2 possessions left midway through the fourth quarter, has a lead. Then they give up a touchdown to tie it. And then in an unfortunate twist that could only happen to Oregon, we're going to talk about Oregon. I think Oregon has some of the most brutal losses of any team in college football that we don't talk about. Starting quarterback Bo Nix, and I know he's taken a lot of heat throughout his career, but he's been awesome at Oregon, gets hurt on the second to last drive of the game. Oregon goes 4 and out, 3 and out, whatever you want to say, 3 and out. What a dumb thing for me to say. 3 and out, punt the ball. Washington gets it back. They then take the lead, and Oregon gets the ball back with, a little over a minute to go, about a minute to go, with a chance to win it. Really, essentially, if you're breaking down how Oregon lost, it comes down to the final few seconds, okay? They convert a 4th down. They are right on the fringes of field goal range. And I think this is probably what a lot of the conversation was with Oregon on Saturday night. But they're right on the fringes of field goal range with about 6 seconds left. Dan Lanning, their head coach, decides to make a very interesting decision that, I'll be honest, I didn't hate it in real time. Essentially, they lined up, tried to run one more play. Rather than kicking a field goal that was not out of their kicker's range, they said, hey, let's see if we can get a quick 4, 5, 6, 8 yards, whatever, get them a little bit closer and get closer for a field goal that could potentially tie it. Just one problem. Bo Nix drops back. Bo Nix throws the ball. The pass is completed to their best wide receiver, Troy Franklin. Then we go to video replay, and we find out that the wide receiver steps out of bounds. For people who do not know, that is a penalty. Oregon gets pushed back. And because Oregon gets pushed back, it sets up for, unfortunately, out of the field goal kicker's range for sure. They throw a pass. It looked like they were trying to run some sort of hook and ladder or something. It's incomplete, and Oregon loses. What I would say really quick on Oregon, listen, there's a lot of criticism of Dan Lanning. I didn't hate the final few seconds of the game. This has happened before. If you execute correctly, and they were really close to executing correctly, right? If this guy's foot was out of bounds by, an inch, 2 inches, if it's 2 inches the other way and he stays in bounds, Dan Lanning looks like a genius if you kick the field goal to tie things and go to overtime. So I didn't really have a problem with that, but Oregon loses. We're going to talk about the fallout in a second. But right as that Oregon game is going final, you all know what happened after that. You flip over to Fox. Actually, I guess that game was on Fox too. So both games on Fox. Great night of college football on Fox. And I'm not just saying that because I host Fox Sports Radio. But, we got a great game at the Rose Bowl between Arizona and UCLA. Now, this isn't what I talked about on Friday's show. But this was another one. I'm not trying to sit here and call myself Nostratorres and this is what I do and this is what I tell you. But the bottom line was, if you looked at the matchup, you could see the scenario again where Arizona kept things interesting. Arizona, the second best pass offense in the Pac-12, only behind Washington. UCLA, another team that struggled to stop the pass. And you could see the scenario was close. Now, also, Arizona has struggled all year to stop the run, and UCLA ran the ball up and down the field on them. Either way, similar game. To the credit of Arizona, Jaden DeLora, their quarterback, big-time transfer from Washington State. He was the Pac-12 Freshman of the Year last year. He plays a game out of his mind, 23 of 29 passing, 315 yards, 2 touchdowns. There is no real game breakdown to be had. I did think UCLA actually kind of handled themselves even more poorly than Oregon late. They were in field goal range, down 6, and they obviously had 4 sets of downs, and they had plenty of time. They kept trying to throw for the end zone. I thought they should have gone short. But regardless, a Dorian Thompson-Robinson pass is actually completed. Unfortunately, again, the receiver falls out of bounds, can't stay in bounds, and UCLA loses. And so with the 2 losses, essentially we know what's at stake, right? Both are eliminated from playoff contention. Both of these teams now are playing for nothing more than bragging rights and a Pac-12 title and an opportunity to go to the Rose Bowl. If both win out, both will. But really, this was just devastating. Now USC is the only team in the Pac-12 with a chance to get to the college football playoff. In the big picture, I want to talk about a few things. One, just quickly on the individual teams. Oregon, I'll just say this about Oregon. I think there's an argument because Oregon, it's up in the Pacific Northwest. They don't have a ton of history outside of maybe the last 20 years or so. I think you could argue that Oregon has taken more just brutal, crushing late season losses than anybody in college football. But because they're in the Pac-12, because they play on the West Coast, because we don't pay attention to them like an SEC school or a big-time Big Ten school, Oregon has taken some crushing losses through the years. 2010, play for a national championship. We all remember how it went down. Michael Dyer, running back at Auburn, about to get tackled, knee never touches the ground, gets up, runs, picks up a bunch of yardage. Auburn kicks a field goal, wins the national championship. I forgot about this. Credit to my writer, Garrett Carr at Aaron Torres Online. 2011, 2012, and 2013, all 3 years, Oregon entered November undefeated, or at the very least, late October, the final weekend of October, undefeated with a chance to play themselves into the then BCS championship. I remember 2012. That was the year Alabama played Notre Dame. I had an Alabama fan that used to read my website back in the day before I went to Fox Sports, and he was a numbers guy. He was an analytics guy before it was cool to be an analytics guy. He said Oregon is the second best team in the country behind Alabama. Alabama plays Notre Dame for a national championship. Oregon in 2011, 2012, 2013 ends up losing games in November to cost themselves undefeated seasons and a shot at a BCS national championship. 2014 is the first college football playoff. They make the title game and lose there. Then the program falls apart. Then how about this? 3 of the last 4 years, the last 3 non-COVID years, 2019, 2021, 2022, November, Oregon enters with a chance to make the college football playoff. Essentially the last 3 non-COVID seasons. Oregon entered November, and if they won out, they were probably going to the playoff. All 3 years, they take brutal losses. 2019, it was to Arizona State. That was the Justin Herbert team. Last year, 2021, they lose to Utah. And this year, and I thought this was the most complete team that they have had, they lose to UCLA, or they lose to Washington at home. I feel bad for this program. I mean, I do. Again, if this was an SEC school, if this was a big-time Big Ten school, I mean, you talk about 4 straight years they would have played for a national championship from 2010 to 2013 if they had just won out in the era where you basically had to be undefeated to play for a championship. And then the last 3 years, you enter November. I mean, it's one thing if you have a year here or a year there or this or that. But they had a 5-year stretch where they were good enough to win a national championship, come up short. And then the last 3 years outside of the COVID year, they're good enough to make the playoff and come up short as well. I feel bad for that program. For UCLA, I'll say this, man. Listen, you never want to lose. You never want to lose as an 18-point favorite. I thought there was some like weird Chip Kelly backlash after that game. Like I saw some people like, oh, if he can't, win this game with a 5th-year senior at quarterback, like, what are we even paying him for? And all I would say is this. First of all, UCLA, we're going to talk about Jim Mora in a second. You ran off a good coach last time. Jim Mora gets UConn to bowl eligibility in year 1. If you think you can do better than Chip Kelly, getting you probably 9 wins, potentially 10, depending on how these next few weeks break out, then you go ahead and live your best life. By the way, if they win out, they are going to win the Pac-12. They are going to the Rose Bowl. But like this idea that Chip Kelly, somehow this was the wrong idea or he's underachieving, I think he's actually perfectly achieving. I mean, USC's been down. He's beaten USC last year. It took him a few years, but they won 8 games last year. Would have been 9 if they had gone to their bowl game. I actually thought they were playing well in the COVID season. They finished 3-4 in that one. They're about to be 9-3. They're about to be 9-3, and UCLA fans are like, oh, I don't know. This Chip Kelly guy, what are we even paying him for? It's like, listen, fire that guy. First of all, good luck paying whatever buyout he has. Then good luck finding a new head coach that's going to have you better prepared for the Big Ten in a few years than Chip Kelly. Finally, what I would say, bigger picture, listen, it's the Pac-12, right? In some way, listen, I do feel bad for the Pac-12. I've told you before, I live in Pac-12 country, okay? And this isn't me being biased because this is the part of the country I live in. The only thing I'm biased is about Jim Mora's UConn Huskies, okay? But at the same time, this is a league that I think many years, because they haven't had that national championship caliber team, I don't think they get the credit they deserve, right? I've said it for years. The Pac-12, I think across the board, top to bottom, has been better than the ACC. But the ACC has had Clemson as that flagship program that basically has carried the league when everybody else is down. The Big 12 for many years, Oklahoma, Lincoln Riley, many years, there really weren't that many good teams behind Oklahoma. Now this year, the league is balanced and awesome. So it's not a criticism of the Big 12 this year. but that is the fact. And the Pac-12, I've always felt, is deeper than it gets credit for. To use a term from, our buddy John Rothstein, too much cannibalization in that league where there isn't that one or two great teams that are always competing at the top of the level. Still, to get the national respect, to get the national credibility that you need going forward without USC and UCLA, this just felt like the year. 3 teams with legitimate playoff aspirations going into the middle of November. Can't ask for much more than that. I take it a step further, and I've said it before. If Utah gets a 1 play in the red zone against Florida, they beat Florida, you have 4 teams in probably the top 10 to 11 to 12 competing for a playoff spot in the final 2 weeks of the season. And people say, this needs to happen, that. If Oregon had won out, if USC had won out, if UCLA had won out, I think they all probably make the college football playoff. Unfortunately, outside of USC, we'll never know. And the bottom line is with USC, they got the toughest road ahead by far. Play at UCLA this weekend, then an all of a sudden surging Notre Dame team to end the regular season. Then they would still have to go to the Pac-12 championship game where they would either play the winner, likely, of Oregon and Utah. Of course, Oregon, they have not played. I think Oregon's better across the board. Utah has already beaten them earlier this year. And so I just bring it up because, man, oh, man, this felt like the year. And the last thing I'll say on the Pac-12, I might have said it over the summer, but I remember having lunch with somebody in the league, pretty, kind of important. And I said to him, I said exactly what I just told you guys and girls. I said, I don't think this league is as bad as people give it credit for. I think there's a lot of good teams and a lot of good athletes and a lot of good coaches in this league. And you know what he said to me? He said, Aaron, you're probably right, but we have to win the big games that matter. And so for UCLA and Oregon to lose, it now comes down to USC running the table from here to get to the playoff. I don't feel good about it. And I think for what would that be? 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22 for the 6th straight year. I think we're going to have no Pac-12 team in the college football playoff. All right, so what I want to do, I want to take a quick break. I do want to come back. I do want to do one of those unique AT segments that you're not going to hear anywhere else. I was watching USC, ironically, on Friday, and I thought to myself, like Lincoln Riley, I know we all thought he was going to be good. This guy is blowing past expectations. Oh, by the way, on Saturday, Oklahoma loses again to fall to 5-5. And I am amazed that in a year where Lincoln Riley has USC at 9-1, Brian Kelly just won the SEC West, Jim Mora has UConn bowl eligible, TCU is 10-0 and playing for a playoff berth, all first-year head coaches. Why is Brent Venables getting a pass? We'll look at the USC-Oklahoma paradox. That's next. Show in a minute. But before we do, I want to welcome back our presenting sponsor, Betfred Sportsbook and the Betfred app. Listen, by now, you know the deal, but I love working with these guys and girls. Started in 1967 in the UK, over 1,600 shops. They have come to the U.S. and made a major splash, okay? They are the presenting sponsor of the Cincinnati Bengals, of the Denver Broncos, of the Colorado Rockies. I told you before, they also were basically the bodyguard and the muscle behind Mattress Mac during the World Series run. And that's what I love about working with Betfred, not just the big names and the organizations and the this and the that. I love that they take care of their bettors better than anybody. Mattress Mac bets with them. They travel the World Series with him. We've sent listeners of the Aaron Torres pod to VIP tailgates at the Broncos game. First pitch of the Colorado Rockies games. The Cincinnati Bengals Betfred suite is bumping, baby. We're going to try to get some of you there later this season. Stay tuned on that. So that is what I love about Betfred. They take care of their customers. And here is the special offer that they have for you. Bet 50 on any game this season. Any game this week, no matter who you like, doesn't matter, college or pro. Bet 50. Get $250 in free bets, courtesy of the Betfred Sportsbook. You cannot get that anywhere else. Thank you to Betfred Sportsbook. They are our presenting sponsor of the Aaron Torres pod and much, much, much more. Everybody, I'm back. Good to be back. I do want to switch gears and hit on something that I do think if this was a busier Monday Aaron Torres pod, if there was other stuff, other big results outside of that Oregon and UCLA, the 2 games late night on Saturday, I don't know if we would get to this, but I do want to talk about 2 teams and 2 programs specifically. And I want to have an honest conversation about them. And I do think sometimes, I listen to some other shows, different people, different, like one thing you could say about me, you can like me, you can dislike me, you can agree, you can disagree. But at the end of the day, I tell you how I feel. I have strong opinions, strong convictions, and I think it's time to have a big boy, real conversation about two teams and two programs, both of which are heading in one direction in a very fast way, one up and one down. The two teams really played, games that really didn't necessarily move the needle a ton this weekend. The first one was the USC Trojans. They played Friday night in the LA Coliseum against Colorado. I'll be blunt. I'm not going to sit here and break the game down and pretend like there's a million takeaways. And on third down in the third quarter with 11 minutes left, this is what happened. It's like, no, that's not what we're about to do right now. I don't know that there's a ton to take away from USC Colorado, but I do think in the totality of the season for USC, I do think there is a pretty big picture takeaway. And that's that USC is awesome. They're 9-1. They enter this week as the only team in the Pac-12 with playoff hopes. Lincoln Riley, I think, has exceeded expectations. I think we all thought maybe in a best case scenario, you go 10-2, 9-3. Well, they're at 9-1. Don't know if they're going to win out. But even if they don't win out, even if they don't make the college football playoff, and I don't think they will, I think we got to give Lincoln Riley credit because I do think he has this program ahead of schedule, and he came to USC to build a national championship contender, and I believe he is well on his way to doing that. Then, of course, there's another team that you probably didn't even know played on Saturday. That was the team that Lincoln Riley left, the Oklahoma Sooners. Oklahoma, they played in a noon Eastern game on FS1 that was buried during a busy time slot with a million different things going on. And if you missed the final score, if you didn't see what happened, here's what you need to know. Oklahoma entered as a really bad Big 12 team. They played a team that was in theory worse than them on the road in West Virginia, and they fell by a final score of 23-20. With it, Oklahoma is now 5-5. They are now 2-5 in the Big 12. And they are looking up, or they're sitting at tied for ninth place. The only team below them is Iowa State. And so what I want to do now is start the conversation and have a big boy conversation. I need to call out one specific group of people. There is a group of people that around this time last year, remember, Lincoln Riley left Oklahoma for Oklahoma State after Bedlam. Bedlam is this weekend, so it was a little under a year ago, a little over a year ago, whatever it is, that Lincoln Riley left. And there was a group of people, some Oklahoma fans, I guess probably some people in the national media that were like, good, get rid of Lincoln Riley, let him leave. Oklahoma is going to be better without him. If you were one of those people, it's time for you to take the L. It's time for you to admit you're wrong. And if you are still one of those people that is still arguing that Lincoln Riley was the problem, it is definitely time for you to turn off this podcast and take a lap around the house, because what I'm going to say is the truth. It's going to hurt. And the bottom line is, if you are one of those Oklahoma fans that truly believes that Lincoln Riley was the problem, it is officially time to get over yourself. And really, this entire conversation to me, it does stem from, again, the conversations that happened around this time last year when Lincoln Riley left Oklahoma for USC. If you remember, the second it happened, there was this narrative of, oh, Lincoln Riley's afraid of the SEC. One, that I cannot personally speak to, okay? I can't tell you what Lincoln Riley's ideas were, why he left, why he didn't leave. I do think that was probably a factor. I've always said I think the more interesting factor was the transfer portal. Forget the SEC. Does he make a move that big if he can't overhaul a roster? But at the end of the day, there was a certain segment of people that said he's afraid of the SEC. I never believed it, but that argument I could at least buy. The argument that I could not buy at any point, however, was this idea that Lincoln Riley was somehow the problem at Oklahoma and that the only way to fix the problem was to get rid of Lincoln Riley. Because of it, I actually think that Brent Venables is getting an incredible pass this year. Nobody is being critical of him, and I simply don't get it. Because when I look at the program that Brent Venables inherited, okay, if your argument is Lincoln Riley is the problem and this thing has to be rebuilt from the ground up, okay, I disagree, but let's just talk this out like adults. Let's have an honest conversation about the Oklahoma program that Lincoln Riley left, that Brent Venables took over, that you said was such a disaster. Here is the truth. Here is the program that Brent Venables took over. 2 of the previous 3 recruiting classes that Lincoln Riley had recruited to Norman were finished top 10 in college football. Okay, so 2 of the previous 3 recruiting classes were in the top 10 in the country. By far the best recruiting anyone was doing in the Big 12 outside of Texas. The class that Lincoln Riley left in 2022, which to Brent Venables' credit, he mostly closed out, finished as a top 10 class in college football. Oh, by the way, this narrative that Lincoln Riley took everybody with him and Brent Venables had this bare bones roster, it's just not true. Yes, Lincoln Riley took Caleb Williams with him. Yes, Caleb Williams is awesome. But at the end of the day, you know who Lincoln Riley took to USC from Oklahoma outside of Caleb Williams? The fourth leading receiver, Mario Williams, a backup corner named Latrell McCutcheon, and that's basically it. Now, Oklahoma did lose some other guys to the portal and to other schools. Jaden Hazelwood to Arkansas, Spencer Rattler to South Carolina, Austin Stogner to South Carolina. But part of that's on Brent Venables and part of that's on the Oklahoma administration. Took him a while to replace Lincoln Riley. Those guys are already in the portal. Those guys are making decisions. That's kind of on Brent Venables to re-recruit them and convince them to come back. Instead, a couple players leave. Lincoln Riley gets the blame. And here's the other part about the roster that Lincoln Riley or that Brent Venables inherited. The truth is that, by the way, one, it was better than people give it credit for. Two, it was less pillage than people want to give it credit for by Lincoln Riley and others. Here's the other part that I can't get over. The transfer portal works both ways. Like, it's not as though the transfer portal didn't, Oklahoma didn't have access to the transfer portal like everybody else did. And so that, to me, is why I continue to be amazed why Brent Venables gets to pass. Listen, I get if you don't think he should win a national championship in year one, I'm with it. I get it. I get new coach, new culture, new this, new that. It takes time, all that good stuff. But what I can't get with is a couple things. One, he was supposed to come in and fix the defense. The defense is actually statistically worse than it was last year. We've talked about it before, and I've gone over it before. They are currently ranked, as we record here on a Sunday into Monday, they are currently ranked 109th nationally in total defense in terms of yards allowed, and 94th in scoring defense in terms of points allowed. So don't tell me that this guy came in to fix the defense and it's somehow worse. But here's the other part, and here's why I have zero sympathy for Brent Venables and zero sympathy for any Oklahoma fan that is not willing to criticize him at all. Have you seen what all these other first-year head coaches are doing? And the bottom line is, in the portal era, it's just less of an excuse to be really bad right away. And it's less of an excuse to say, we need 3-4 years to get our guys in and rebuild, and the culture was a mess. Well, culture was a mess at LSU too. Brian Kelly hasn't playing for an SEC title in 2 weeks. They clinched the SEC West on Saturday. By the way, Sonny Dykes, in your own conference, first-year head coach, just is going to play for a Big 12 title. Don't know if he'll win it. Don't know if he'll make a playoff. But he's going to win 10 games in his first year at TCU. My alma mater, we're talking about Jim Mora in a minute. 4-32 in the previous 4 years before he took over. They're 6-5. They beat Liberty. They're going to a bowl game. I think he should get National Coach of the Year votes. I don't know if I'd give it to him ahead of Josh Heupel. I don't know if I'd give it to him ahead of Brian Kelly, but he's in the short conversation. So don't tell me that it takes forever. And Coach Brent Venables just needs time. Brent Venables is the only coach in the country that needs time, apparently. By the way, you know who was a coach who inherited a much worse situation than Brent Venables? Lincoln freaking Riley at USC. Lincoln Riley, think about how bad, I still think that what Lincoln Riley's doing is kind of sort of being underrated on the national scale. I know it's the Pac-12. I know the competition isn't great, but I'll tell you this, the Pac-12 is better than the ACC this year. I can tell you that. The Pac-12, I would say from 1 to 12, top to bottom, is unquestionably better than the Big 10 this year. Now, I don't think anybody is as good as Ohio State or Michigan, but I think you get to 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 9. The Pac-12 is probably better. So Lincoln Riley walks into a conference. It's not tough. I'm not saying it's the SEC West, but I'm not saying it's the easiest thing in the world ever. And he's got them at 9-1 overall. This A team that finished 4-8 last year, a team that lost by 29 to UCLA, by 18 to Oregon State at home, by 16 to Utah at home, all of a sudden now is 9-1 and playing for a Pac-12, potentially, if they win next week, they'll obviously play for a Pac-12 title. They would play for potentially to go to the college football playoff, all that good stuff. Now, again, I'm not saying two things here. One thing, and I want to make clear, I'm not saying Oklahoma needs to fire Brent Venables. Now, I've made that case before. I think they should think about it because I don't think the defense should be this bad this quick. It's not going to happen, though, just like Jimbo Fisher at Texas A&M is not going to happen. So I'm not saying they fire Brent Venables. And I'm not saying that Lincoln Riley has all the answers and USC is going to make a playoff and they're going to beat Georgia to win a title. That's not what I'm saying at all. What I am saying, though, is this. If you're an Oklahoma fan, that is still blaming Lincoln Riley. A couple things, even before that. If you take two things out of this segment, this is it. If you're an Oklahoma fan that truly believes that Brent Venables still needs time, okay, I disagree with you, but I get it. But the point of this segment is to say Lincoln Riley is ahead of schedule at USC. They look better than they should at this point. And if you are still an Oklahoma fan that truly believes that Lincoln Riley was the problem, it's time to get over yourself. It's time to look in the mirror. And it's time to ask some questions about that coach that has you at 5-5. This isn't September 11th anymore, September 14th, September 27th, whatever. It is November 14th, and you're fighting just to get to a bowl game. It's really bad, and it's time to stop blaming the coach that you used to have and start blaming the coach a little bit that is currently there. All right, so what I want to do, take a quick break, come back, look at the rest of the week. What is it, 11? College football? I can't believe it's week 11. We'll talk my UConn Huskies. I want to talk Mark Stoops, man. I'm a little bit disappointed in him, the effort that we got, and some other odds and ends from across college football. Take a quick break. Be right back. All right, we're going to get back to the show in a minute. But before we do, I want to welcome back Bracket Fanatics. Bracket Fanatics is the sponsor of our Aaron Torres Pod NFL Pick'em Challenge. By now, you know the deal. We've worked with Bracket Fanatics for years with the NCAA tournament, but they have expanded to now include NFL football season-long brackets. And if you have not entered the Aaron Torres Pod NFL Pick'em Challenge, here's the good news. It's not too late. Go to bracketfanatics.com, join bracket name Torres, and you're automatically entered to win the great prizes that Bracket Fanatics is providing all year. Those prizes, well, we're giving out $100 weekly winners, $1,000 season-long cash prize. Last week's week 10 winner, was BC Castaldo. Congratulations to BC. He's already been contacted by Bracket Fanatics. And if you have not entered, it's not too late. Enter, pick games. All you got to do is make picks. Pick those games, and when it happens, automatically enter to win $100 weekly cash prizes. And it's not too late to be entered to win the $1,000 season-long cash prize. Now, you're going to have to make up some ground, but it's not too late. You can start your own bracket with friends there, bracketfanatics.com. But to join our bracket, join bracket tab, bracket name Torres, tell them Torres sent you, bracketfanatics.com. All right, everybody. I don't want to say back because I'm actually recording on Friday night. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see a very interesting background for your boy Torres. But Friday night, we had really our first marquee college basketball game of the entire season, Gonzaga versus Michigan State, right? All week long, we said, where are the big college basketball games? Why can't we play any big games? Where are they on the schedule? Well, one, we're going to get a bunch this week. We got the Champions Classic, Gonzaga, Texas, all that good stuff. By the way, end of the week, Kentucky and Gonzaga. But on this Friday, we did get a marquee game, Gonzaga and Michigan State on an aircraft carrier in San Diego. I was actually at the game. I'm actually recording from the game. And so if you go on YouTube, you can actually see in the background the naval ship, the USS Abraham. And I have a makeshift studio that I just set up here because I want to do some quick, immediate reaction to this game. Gonzaga wins literally, essentially at the buzzer, 64-63. They basically trailed the entire game, but they rallied to win. Tough loss for Michigan State. And really, when I think about this game, what I would just say, it's pretty straightforward. And by the way, you probably hear all sorts of stuff in the background. I got somebody dribbling, somebody passing, shooting, whatever. But with that said, when I think about this game and when I look back on this game, this is what I would say. I have a lot of reaction. I have a lot of thoughts. I don't know if there are necessarily a lot of takeaways, though, and let me explain why. The game, as I said, if you missed it, was played on an aircraft carrier. Listen, it was awesome. It was an awesome setup. They did this about 10 years ago, Michigan State and North Carolina. Obviously, I don't know if it's obvious, but I was not there for that one. This one was incredible, though. Beautiful scenery. If you missed anything, by the way, I posted a bunch of pictures on the Instagram page, Aaron Torres Pod. But at the end of the day, beautiful scenery, beautiful setup, aircraft carrier in the San Diego harbor. But here's the bottom line, and here's why I don't want to overreact in any which direction to what we saw on Friday. It's because the game was outside, the game was on an aircraft carrier, and the conditions were not ideal to play basketball. There's a reason we play basketball indoors, people, and we learned it on Friday night. Essentially, if you didn't see the game was basically, I would guess by the time, probably about 10 minutes into the game, the tip-off, the temperature was probably in the 30, probably like low 50s, high 40s, and you could see it on the court. You could see guys the second they went to the bench. I noticed Gonzaga's players were throwing towels over their legs to just kind of protect themselves from the cold. You see players kind of constantly grabbing their hands, rubbing their hands. It was funny. I asked Rasir Bolden from Gonzaga after the game. I said, could you feel, like when you shoot the ball, could you feel the wind and the breeze and being outside? He said, absolutely. He said, you see it and you adjust after 2 or 3, but that's really why I don't want to super overreact to either of these teams after this game, simply because of the fact that they were playing in conditions that they will never play in ever again this season. And frankly, probably never again in their careers. Right. And it showed on the court. 7 of 34, the two teams combined from 3. They missed a combined 18 foul shots. And so because of it, like what we saw, we're never going to see again from either of those teams. And so again, don't want to overreact, but I do think there are a few takeaways. One, from Michigan State's perspective, I'll be honest, like I actually thought early in the game, I thought they did an incredible job of actually quote unquote handling the elements. I tweeted it. I was joking, but I was kind of serious. And what I said was, Michigan State is handling, we talk about football all the time, handling the elements, right? Wind, rain, cold, hot, whatever. And I joked, I said, in basketball, Michigan State is handling the elements. Early on in the game, it was very clear to me that that Gonzaga, it didn't look like they wanted to be there. It didn't look like they wanted anything to do with the cold weather. It didn't look like they wanted anything to do with the wind. And Michigan State was out there like, man, we got this. Yeah, it's cold, and we're loving every freaking second of it, right? They say in sports all the time that you take after your coach, that you take after, that you embody your coach. Well, I think Michigan State did that on Friday night, because early on, they were just the tougher team. They wanted it more. They were getting to loose balls, and they really were in complete control of this game for probably about the first 30 or so minutes. Now, why did they lose control of the game? Well, it's a couple things. And I think it's interesting, and this is kind of a takeaway that I believe is not an overreaction, is it's interesting with Michigan State. We saw what their Achilles heel is this year. And frankly, we saw why they're not a top 25 team. Guards are really good. Tyson Walker played well. AJ Hoggard played well. Trey Holloman off the bench, I really enjoyed how he looked. But I bring it up because, all offseason long, we kind of looked at Michigan State and said, they actually don't have a lot of size down low. And that doesn't sound like a Michigan State team. That doesn't sound like a Big Ten team. But that was the Achilles heel of Michigan State all season long. And it really came to fruition Friday night in San Diego. Maddie Sissoko is really Maddie Sissoko. I'm sorry, I'm tripping over his name here. Really their best big guy, didn't even really play much last year, was phenomenal in the first half. But really when Gonzaga made their run was when he picked up his 4th foul. Then later on, their other big guy who's kind of a combo for Joey Hauser, he fouls out. They bring Sissoko back in. It's Maddie Sissoko. That was how I tripped over his name. They bring Sissoko back in. He fouls out. And essentially, that was the issue we thought all season long, or all off season long, with Michigan State. To be blunt, I don't tell anybody, I certainly don't tell a Hall of Famer how to run his program, but that was the conversation around Michigan State all off season. Are they going to add a big guy? Should they add a big guy? Why didn't they add a big guy? It comes back to bite them on opening night. And I'll take it a step further. You go to the Big Ten, that's going to be a problem when you face Michigan with Hunter Dickinson. You face Ohio State with Zeb Key. You face I'm trying to think, Indiana with Trace Jackson Davis. Say what you want about about the Big Ten. They got big guys. That they got guys down low that can handle their business. And I think this is something that's going to be a problem for Michigan State all along. And as I said, I think we see now why they're probably a fringe top 25 team. I think they'll get some wins. Like I said, I like the guard. From the Gonzaga perspective, it's hard for me to have any definitive takeaways other than Drew Timmy's freaking awesome, okay? Like I just said, Michigan State was in foul trouble. Part of that was Timmy, but also part of it was when all those guys got in foul trouble, Timmy was just attacking second chance points, doing the things that he does. And I know that certain fan bases don't like him, and he's got the mustache, and he's got this, and he's got that. That dude delivered 22 points on Friday night. And really, like, the 22 points, they all mattered. Like, I mean, obviously you win by 1, every single point matters. But the 22 points, I just thought, they were in the flow, in the moment, like the ability, like I said, the ability
second chance points, loose balls. He just made so many big plays late. Now, in terms of Gonzaga's backcourt, I'll just say this. It's really hard for me to make any definitive, declarative statements about them. As I said, Gonzaga, a team that traditionally shoots around 40% from three, 4 of 18 from three, 22%. I don't think that will happen again at any point going forward this season. And so because of it, again, not going to make a big deal about Gonzaga. I thought they rallied. I thought they showed heart. Like I said, I felt like it took them a while to get into the flow of the game, to just basically accept, hey, wait a second now. It's cold. We got to deal with this. I was funny. Mark Few kind of said that in the post game. He basically said, like, look, bottom line, I told our guys, it's not that we're not playing a good team. It's just that at the end of the day, we're beating ourselves. We're making mistakes. We have to lock in. Gonzaga does that, and they get the win. And like I said, I thought the guards played well late. And I think, frankly, that is the worst that the guards will play. Good news for both teams. We're going to learn a lot about them soon, thanks to the Kentucky Wildcats. Gonzaga will play. How about this? Gonzaga will play at Texas next week. Then they fly home, play Kentucky at home before the PK 85. Meanwhile, Michigan State, how about this? They play Kentucky on Tuesday in the Champions Classic. And oh, by the way, they will also play Villanova late next week. As I record here, Villanova has just lost to Temple. I don't know much about that game. With that said, I think it's time for me to get out of here. Obviously, non-traditional end to the show, but it was a fun show. I hope you enjoyed the live reaction from the cruise ship, or from the aircraft carrier, excuse me. If you're not subscribed to the YouTube page, please make sure to do so.